Hi, everyone. Welcome to this special PDW panel session. My name is Young-Sun Park. I'm the organizer and chair of this session titled How to Enhance Effectiveness of International Management Practices, Providing Value to Stakeholders of IB Education. We have a very important and timely topic to address today. I believe that international business education is at the crossroad in the midst of COVID-19 pandemic. With the slowdown of globalization, the value of international education is also being challenged and questioned, and may even be in crisis. Given this background, this session will provide you with critical insights into how different stakeholders, namely recruiters, deans, alumni, and our students perceive the value of international business education. So let me pull up the PowerPoint slide and I will share the slide with you guys. Let's see. Okay, so we are pre-recording this session because it's the first time that the Academy of Management is holding the virtual conference. We have a great panelist today, including myself. We have 5 panelists who has quite an extensive experience in teaching international business and international management subjects. So my name is once again Young-Sun Park. I'm teaching at LMU, Loyola Marymount University. I'm going to start with a project overview, and it's going to be followed by Anthony Seaton, Temple University, and he will present the results from student perspective. Then Alan Bird, Pacific University, and he's going to share the results from the dean's perspective. And Kiyohiko Ito, University of Hawaii, Manoa, he's going to present the views of the recruiters about the value of international business education. Then we have Len Trevino from Florida Atlantic University. Thanks, Len. And he will share that the results from the alumni, the survey. And I'm going to wrap up, come back, and we'll all share that the conclusion section. I'm going to ask that more insight into each of the panelists. Okay, so let me just present as a value of IB education project overview and how we started this project and what we have found so far and what has been the process of this project. Well, according to the Academy of Management website, this is the domain statement of International Management Division. Indeed, IM Division covers many different topics involving the challenge of managers conducting business across countries. I'm sure you would agree, IB education is critical in improving the effectiveness of international management practices. This panel presents the results from an ongoing study designed to better understand what specific factors associated with IB education are most valuable for future global managers and to various stakeholders. So the survey was designed by the QEB members and also collected by these members. So let me briefly introduce the QEB because this study was once again organized based on the key stakeholders since they are the receivers of IB education value. Based on both their academic backgrounds and their experience running successful IB programs, the committee members identified potential value points from an IB education based on both specific elements of international business degree. For example, the full major or minor, or some schools offer that double degree, as well as the supplemental the sources of IB education that may or may not have been required for a degree, such as what the study abroad programs or international internships. Okay? So let me just quickly go over this organization. What is QEB, which stands for Consortium for Undergraduate International Business Education. So QEB is an organization established in 2003 to promote, enhance, and foster innovation in delivering and sharing high-quality international business education. Currently, 50 schools around the world are the members of the QEB. Here you can see that the list of QEB members. So mostly these universities in the States, in the US. In examining the value of an IB education, we need to define first what is meant by the term international business education. There are many different ways to provide values through international business education. Schools can provide, once again, international business education through potential components of IB education could range from full programs, such as an international business major, minor, or double degree, to more specific elements, international components, such as foreign language requirement, participation in study abroad program, and international internships. Therefore, the significant parts of this project involved asking stakeholders, about specific elements of an IB education and the degree to which those elements are perceived to add value and why. So we recognized and identified where the differences can be originated. First, the differences, it could come from the genders, right? And also the races and ethnic groups. It could be sources of the variances. For recruiters, we expect some differences in factors that contribute to either short-term or long-term career success. Location and size of the schools could also be a source of variances. The perceived value of IB education at larger schools located in metropolitan areas, such as New York and Los Angeles, it could be quite different from that of small schools in the rural areas. So we do have some results that we can explain these sources of variances or any differences across these elements. But still, this is an ongoing study, so we don't have all the results, but we'll be happy to present in the future conference about the results about these elements. Okay. Here, I just want to finally present what was the process to collect the data and come up with the results that we're presenting today. So the QEB value of international business project actually started in an initial idea generated during the spring 2017 annual meeting. I believe it was in Boston, right? Initial workshops were created, work groups were created in fall 2017, and more extensive work groups continued working on separate parts of the survey during spring 2018. Once the survey instruments had been developed and finished with pre-testing, the data collection began in summer 2018 and continued until late summer 2019. In parallel with the questionnaire administration, a series of panels were presented at the previous AIB annual meetings in 2018 and 2019. But this is still the ongoing process. We are still collecting the data, and we'll continue with analyze the data, and it is our hope that we'll continue to update the results in future conferences and meetings. Okay, so here's a quick summary of the respondents. It's over 800 fully usable responses were collected. And students is the largest sample size, followed by the alumni and recruiters and deans. Responses mainly come from that more than 20 QB member schools across the US, from the East Coast and all the way to West Coast and Hawaii. And most of these were the participatory organization schools in the survey. They ranked among the top schools, among the top 20 or top 10 in the US News and World Report, international undergraduate international business programs. So over 80% of the survey respondents come from these same highly ranked programs, which we believe this suggests a high degree of reliability and validity of the results that we're presenting today in terms of indicating factors that lead to IB program success. So let me introduce again Professor Anthony Seaton from Temple University will share this results.
Thank you very much, Young Soon. Again, my name is Tony Seaton. I'm from Temple University. Before my time here, I spent 25 years in corporate management. And so I feel very privileged to look at this from really both sides, having spent many years hiring these students and now preparing them for careers in business. And I'm delighted to be talking about the students because I think they're the most important stakeholder group that we interviewed as part of this this process. And so just so you're aware, these are students who were currently enrolled in the program at the time in which these surveys went out. So in our first slide here, the data is very pleasing. We've got 93% of our respondents rated their IB education as valuable, which is great. We definitely want our consumers of our product to conclude that it's value. 81% of them said it was highly valuable. Beyond that, we asked them, how likely are you to recommend your IB education experience? And the numbers were similar there. Again, 93% said that they are likely to recommend their IB education experience, and 80% said they're highly likely to do so. So we know that they're having a good experience when they're in the program and they think highly enough about it to recommend to other people. We want to go beyond that though, and this was, the question we're asking the students is a little different than the question that we're asking of the other stakeholder groups, because we're asking the students to really kind of anticipate what future success might look like as a result of their IB education. So we move to the next slide here. And one more past that, please. The next slide past this, please. All right. So we had the students rate particular success factors as they saw them, again, in line with the current experience they were having with their IB education. And we were very happy and pleased to see that many of the components of an IB education rated very highly for these students here. The highest rank would be cross-cultural literacy, which 78.3% rated this as a very high success factor. In fact, they ranked it even higher than leadership experience, which quite often we associate with future corporate success for students. But in this case, cross-cultural literacy ranked even higher. And I would ask you just kind of put a pin in that, because as my colleagues present the findings of their stakeholder groups, you're going to see this as one of actually a few common themes that are going to arise here. Other success factors, again, that are perceived as very important for our students included foreign language fluency. Over 74% saw that as important. Also, the IB coursework itself, and in terms of international internships, more than 2/3 of them saw value in this. 69.7% saw the value in international internships. And lastly, I would just draw attention to the actual specific international business coursework, whether it was part of a major or a minor. Almost 2/3 of the students, 64.8%, saw this as contributing to their future success. So from the perspective of our students, those elements that are unique to an IB program, they saw as very indicative of potential future success. Now, what we tried to do on the following slide, the next slide here, is just kind of take a look at this by gender. And so we're going to move forward, actually, 2 slides. And we'll go 1 more slide.
Somehow it's not moving. I don't know why. Oops.
All right. There we go. The joys of Zoom, right? All right. So here what we tried to do is just see if there was any discernible difference in terms of, again, these perceived success factors between male and female students. And there were a couple interesting differences here. In terms of those enrolled in IB major or minor, it appears as if the female students saw this as a much more important factor related to success than their male counterparts, who rated it at 60%. Also, female students saw it at 72.73%, saw that studying abroad, the experience of being overseas, whether it was a semester abroad or even a shorter term experience than that, saw this as highly contributing. On the male side of it, what we saw was not so much about study abroad, but international internships seemed to be of greater value to them. And they much more highly valued the internship experience overseas than the females did in this population. The other way we decided to slice and dice this data was along race and ethnic lines. And so the next slide here, we'll pull this up real quick. Thank you. Looks at the differences based on race and ethnicity. And this I found, to be quite honest, to be the most interesting slice that we took at this. And I guess largely because I work in a very large urban North Philadelphia school where you know, these groups are very heavily represented within the school itself. And so some of the things I would point out as noteworthy were, in terms of the value of the IB major minor itself, this was most highly valued among the Hispanic population and had still a significant value among our Asian population. So it was valued by 73.19% of Hispanics and 60% of Asians. And so I'm excited to dig a little bit deeper there to explore, why is there that big difference in terms of the formal education, the major and the minor itself, between these two particular ethnic groups. Other differences that we noticed were along the lines of cross-cultural literacy. And here we saw that Black students rated this much higher, their cross-cultural experience, much higher at almost 80%, again, compared to, say, maybe our white students, who saw it at 54%. Other differences as well would include foreign language fluency, global coursework, and IB coursework specifically. And again, in all 3 of those categories, we saw that our Hispanic students saw the greatest value in this, or saw it as contributing in the greatest way to their potential future success, and to a much lesser degree by Black and Asian students. The last thing I would call out here would be around IB networking, right? And within IB networking, Asian students rated that as most significant or most important to their success, while white students actually saw it, while very, very significant, well above 2/3 of the respondents saw this as important to their future success, it wasn't near the level that it was for Asian students. Now, as we dig deeper into this data in the future, you know, one of the things I'm going to be very interested in observing here is what's driving these differences. Is it cultural? Is how they were raised? Is it economic opportunity that's available to them? Does it have to do with where they were raised necessarily, whether it is in an urban setting or overseas? And so as we continue to review this data, I'll be excited to report out additional findings. And with that, I'd like to pass it on to my colleague, Kihiko. Nope, Alan, sorry.
Okay. Thanks, Tony. So I'm going to introduce Professor Alan Berg from Pacific University, and he's going to share the results we collected from deans. So 24 deans that participated in this survey.
Thank you, Young-Sun, and thank you, Tony, for setting that up. I was tasked with analyzing the dean's response, and deans as stakeholders sit at an interesting intersection. They deal directly with students or indirectly, as the case may be. They work closely with recruiters and with alumni. And so one might expect them to have a finger on the pulse of what the value is of an IB education for their students. I would also note that deans, because they oversee the larger College of Business, also are able to consider the value of an IB education within the broader context of a business education. And I think as we get into some of the results here, we're going to see that. So the very first question we address is the value of an IB education for acquiring an entry-level job. Of course, one of the concerns that deans have is can our undergraduates find work once they depart the institution? And this is striking. It suggests that on the top end of the survey, and I think we've got that highlighted, roughly 75% or 3 of 4 deans see the value of an IB education as being very important, as contributing to the acquisition of an entry-level job. And that speaks well because as someone who's been in the field for a long period of time, historically the perspective has been that an IB education prepares you for subsequent jobs, but other factors weigh heavily in gaining that initial position. This suggests that deans see a different picture, and they see value of an IB education in helping to secure that entry-level job. And of course, the follow-on question is, well, how does IB education, what's its value later on in the career? And so in this next slide, if we can move to that, they see even greater value. 81%, if we drop off the 5 spot, the top 2 evaluations of high and very high, 81% see extreme value with an IB education. So that notion that an IB education is something that contributes value as one moves up the organization or as one moves along in one's career is certainly reflected in the dean's responses. And then finally, we'll go to the same heat map that Tony reviewed for students and take a look at how deans see this. And here we're going to see some interesting dynamics, and I think some of the responses reflect that broader perspective that that deans may have vis-a-vis other college of business majors. What stands out immediately, and Tony pointed in this direction, was the value of cross-cultural literacy. You see, first of all, I'd say before we go there, the deans see tremendous value in domestic internships and international internships. And as we look at that, the weight placed on domestic internships, I evaluate that in my conversations with deans to reflect the fact that deans understand the value of internships, and they see far more domestic internships, and they see a tighter connection between students acquiring jobs and that domestic internship. And that perhaps is not surprising, because while there's a growing number of international internships, I think there's certainly a lower likelihood that such international internships lead directly to a job offer from the country where those internships are performed. Some of the other things that stand out as we look at the broad areas of green is that deans tend to stress the broader general characteristics that serve all business majors, both what we might call domestic or regular business majors and international business majors. They focus on high GPA, the college attended. But when we drill down and look closely at the at those things related to international business, particularly globally related coursework, IB coursework, and as I say, cross-cultural literacy, these things really stand out. And then again, something that really stands out is IB networking and professional organization events. So deans recognize the importance of establishing relationships, contacts, connections. And this is something that, as we go back and look at the student data, is perhaps something we ought to stress and emphasize for students that during the time they're students, they ought to take advantage of these because deans certainly see value in that. So with that, I'll hand the mic, if you will, back over to Young-sun, okay. And we'll hear what the other stakeholders are saying.
Great. Thanks, Alan. Let's see. Okay, the next, I'd like to ask Professor Kiyohiko Ito from University of Hawaii, Manoa, and he's going to share the results we collected from the recruiters.
Thank you, Young-san. I'm Kiyohiko Ito. This is the results of the recruiters survey. Okay, recruiters are very important external stakeholders, needless to say, and their opinions count. And however, because they are the external stakeholders, we could not really control the number of the respondents. So that there are some limitations. That is the first caveat is that the total number of respondents turned out to be 40. That means that not every CUIB member universities reported the recruiters' results. In other words, only limited number of universities reported the recruiters' result. So there may be some bias, but also recruiters varies with respect to the locations, the industries, and the respondents' particular functions. So that those are some limitations we have. But the good news is that generally speaking, the recruiters rated IB education very highly, both for short-term and long-term career success. With respect to the rating of the value of the, please go back to the one slide prior one. Yes, this one. The 64% of recruiters valued IB education highly, but you can see a sort of bimodal distribution. It's not a uniform increase of the importance of the candidate's success for acquiring an entry-level job or short-term career success. In other words, some recruiters rated IB education highly, but others rated it not that high, kind of in between. But in general, the average is high, on high side. Okay, let's go to the individual factors. Next slide, please. This is the recruiters' ratings of short-term career success factors of the prospective students or the applicants for their positions. Some interesting tendency you can see is if you take a look at the far right-hand side numbers, for the short-term career success wise, leadership position extracurricular activities, high GPA, the university's brand or university's names, domestic internship, cross-cultural literacy, and international internships. Those are the key important factors, tendencies that the recruiters feel the important short-term career success factors. On the other hand, the next slide shows that the long-term career success. The next slide, yes, 68% said that IB education is important for the prospective job candidates' long-term career success. Here you can see a little bit more clear-cut normal distribution. The center is about the 5.5, and it's a right-hand side, so that they value the IB education highly too. So with the next slides, we have an individual results, and some of them are again interesting. The importance of leadership position remains the same for their long-term career success, but the extracurricular activities, high GPA, university brands, and domestic internships ratings went down slightly lower than in comparison with their short-term success factors. Cross-cultural literacy stayed very high, and international internships importance appears to be getting higher in comparison with the short-term success factors results. And also the IB networking and the professional organizational events participation turned out to be important, again, in comparison with long-term career success, and fluency in the foreign languages importance jumps up in comparison with the short-term career success. That means that in general, overall, IB education is valued highly, but the distribution of those responses turned out to be slightly more varied or flat in comparison with the results that Tony showed. And you can see some results Len next will show. That means that there are more variations we can see from the recruiters' survey results. That would lead to us to try to get the data. More data would be important, although because we cannot control their response rate directly, so it is going to be a kind of a difficult issue, but we need to continue to collect more data. Okay, that's about all on the recruiter's result. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kyohiko. So we'll continue and move to the next presenter. So final, the group of stakeholders is alumni. So we collect quite a large number of data from alumni, unlike the recruiters that Kyohiko mentioned, that it's not easy to collect the data from recruiters, external stakeholders, but the alumni seem to be more interested in, because they can actually tell that what has been useful when they were students, and then they could have learned something else, and then when they go back to the schools and etc. So at this point that Professor Len Trebinor from Florida Atlantic University, he's going to share the results of the alumni with us. Okay, Len?
Thank you, Young-Sung. Once again, I'm Len Trevino, Professor of International Business from Florida Atlantic University. And I was just thinking, yeah, it's quite interesting that we were able to capture so much data from alumni because it's not easy to stay in touch with them sometimes. But as you can see on the first slide here, almost 100%, 94% of students found the value of IB education to be very high. And I wanted to reach out to one of my former students and find out what she thought about the IB degree. So I called one of my top students from a few years ago, Ms. Francisca Cañas, and she's now working at Signal Funding in Fort Lauderdale, a private equity firm. And I asked her, what do you think about your IB degree? How did it help prepare you for the initial success that you're having? And she pointed out that first, she said that the IB degree helped her to be able to negotiate better in her position as group managing sales and marketing coordinator at Signal. She found it helped her be more attuned with her ability to negotiate with diverse cultures, especially the Hispanic marketplace, which exists in South Florida. She also mentioned that her experiential development by taking a X-Culture class, which pairs her with students from around the globe, prepared her also for part of this activity and enabled her to acquire some cross-cultural literacy, which we'll see later. And we've already found out that this is one of the contributing factors to student success. Next slide, please. So on this side, we found that students were asked, how likely are you to recommend an international business education to prospective students, to incoming students? And 93%, almost the same as last time, were likely to recommend IB education to incoming students. And as you can see on the slide, a full 80% in the top two categories. So not only did students find this valuable for themselves, but they were willing to recommend it to friends and colleagues. Next slide, please. So this slide talks about the elements of IB programs that they felt were most likely to have contributed to their success. And a couple of things here stand out. The first is that everybody's talked about already is that cross-cultural literacy. A full 46% found that this element helped contribute to students' initial success in their programs. Fluency in foreign languages here at 31%. Students found that this was a very important consideration, and as I think Francisca, the student that I mentioned, would certainly state that that helped her be successful in the South Florida marketplace, her fluency in Spanish. Study abroad experience at 41%. This is one of the elements that over the years, when I talk to recruiters, they mention this as the boots on the ground. When students can get to an international experience, this goes a long way to helping them to mature and be successful and contributing to their short and long-term success. And finally is domestic internships at 37%. That was also found to be very high and contributing to students' success in their international business positions. Next slide. So gender differences, we also looked at gender and race differences, and some interesting things came up here. As far as female students, they placed a lot of emphasis on leadership, and they found that that was a big factor that contributed to their ability to be successful. Roles and extracurricular activities were also important. Males, they liked domestic internships. I think that was also in another slide, but everybody liked domestic internships. That was one of the highest elements that contributed to success. And extracurricular activities, I pointed out that females were very high. Males didn't find that to be as big of a factor for them. And next slide, please. Race and ethnicity. So differences based on race, ethnicity from our alumni. We tried to break down the data in terms of Caucasian, Hispanic, and Asians. And interestingly enough, Hispanics saw value in foreign language as a key success factor. And they have a heavy emphasis on domestic internships. And I think cross-cultural, where are we there? Cross-cultural literacy. Hispanics raised that as higher than most, and that was consistent with Francisca's comments when I spoke with her yesterday. Globally related coursework, Hispanics rated that a lot higher than the other students at 72%. And everybody liked domestic internships, with Hispanics rating them the highest at 83%. By the way, most of these domestic internships, in fact, all of them, have some international component. I just approved another student a few weeks ago for his international internship here in South Florida. I had to make sure that it had enough international components to it. And finally, Asian students, they placed high value on extracurricular activities at 67%. Caucasian students, like everyone else, valued domestic internships. That was their priority. They also valued the study abroad experience at 61%. Hispanics were at 69%. So as you can see, this is really fine-grained data. And for an organization like QUIBI, that's been in existence since 2003, we really value the ability to understand how the IB education influences students, stakeholders, recruiters, deans, et cetera. So thanks for joining us today, and I'll turn the mic back over to Young-Sun.
Okay, thanks everyone. It was quite interesting that listening to and how the different stakeholders actually view the value of IB education in a different way. So the last slide before we draw a conclusion I want to share with you is some kind of comparison across these 4 stakeholders. So as our panelists have already presented, it is obvious, all the stakeholders, they put really that the high scores, they mark really high, and how important the cross-cultural literacy would be, and it delivered the value, across all the stakeholders, recruiters and the deans, and also the alumni and students. And then particularly, I think that from dean's perspective, this is also one of the highest after the international internship. So we see across the board that all these stakeholders, they think it's absolutely critical that students need to have the high level of cross-cultural literacy, and it will help not only to find the jobs, and probably that it will also help down the career, both short-term and long-term. Another interesting thing is students really value the fluency in foreign language. As you see that there's quite a discrepancy between the dean's perception about how valuable to acquire another foreign language and with the students group. So I think that sometimes that we think that the students are not interested in learning, and it might be too much. We don't want to overburden students to require them take another language. But actually that it's quite interesting to find out actually students, they are willing to learn. They think it's really important to equip with another language in this global economy and global world. However, the both stakeholders, right? I'm talking about the dean and students, and along with the recruiters, they all agree the international internship is really critical in delivering the value of IB education. So I think those are the three kind of key interesting areas: fluency in foreign language, cross-cultural literacy, and as our panelists repeatedly reiterate, international internship along with the domestic internship with the international business components are really critical. So before I open up to our panelists and ask their inputs about this project, I want to just to draw the quick conclusion about the results that we presented today. And obviously that we found some similarities and differences across key stakeholders, and also the races and ethnic groups. Their perception about the IB education was different. As I mentioned previously, we were able to identify the key elements of IB education. These seems to be the three critical areas. Number one, the improving cross-cultural literacy, and we have to provide more opportunity for the students with international/domestic internships. And I think the schools have to be aware of the students are really interested in acquiring foreign language. So schools that do not require that foreign language during their college days, maybe that they have to have some kind of second thought and maybe revise the curriculum to meet the student needs and interests. The question is that now, we are faced with this new sort of what the normals and then new era. So how are we going to deliver these three elements we just identified in this disrupted global business environment in order to enhance the effectiveness of international management practices? This is a really challenging question. So we have to find a way, for example, the virtual international internships, and how we can virtually help the students to continue improve cross-cultural literacy. Is there any way that we can help students to acquire the foreign language virtually without actually that they're spending time overseas? So all in all, I think that the project sponsored by the QEB, it has contributed to improving the IB education. Again, this is an ongoing project, so we'll continue to collect the data and update the results whenever the opportunity comes up in the future conferences. And our plan is to actually produce some kind of guidelines or the useful research report. So at this point, I'd like to ask that each panelist, if you have any additional comments that you have regarding this project, or any of the findings you think that you want to make any suggestions, recommendations to the dean or recruiters, how we can help the students to get a job in order to do it, what are the areas that we have to continue to work to try to improve the IB education. So I'll open the floor to everyone. So anyone? Alan, would you like to start with?
Young-sun, yeah. As I look at this data, three things really stand out to me, and especially as I look across the four stakeholders. And the first is, when I think about what students are saying and what alumni, what former students are saying after they get out into the job market and pursue careers, is that they seem to have a pretty clear idea of what they're looking for and of the value of what they're getting through their education. And I would say that suggests that students who pursue an IB major or move in that direction are self-selecting, and they have, and I would say my own experience has been those students are often, I would say, much clearer about their career aspirations and what they're looking for in their careers compared to general business majors. The second thing that stands out is the occasional and somewhat lack of alignment across the four stakeholders in the value that they see. And I think that really opens up an opportunity for a conversation between deans and recruiters, and between alumni and between students as to what they're looking for. In some cases, there's not that much of a misalignment, but very clearly students would benefit from a better understanding of what deans see and what recruiters see. And I think recruiters and deans might benefit from a better understanding of why these students are pursuing these careers in international business and why what the value they see in that education. The third observation I have is one that moves in, I won't call it a negative direction, but looks at the numbers, if you will, upside down. There is so much information packed in those respective heat maps for the different groups. And as you look at those, it's interesting to ask what is not being emphasized. For example, students and recruiters see value in volunteer work, but alumni don't see as much value in volunteer work. And I'll just suggest rather than skip through the slides, that when the report comes out, those who are interested go back and take a look at those. There are a number of areas where the things that are not being emphasized can be equally useful in giving us some insights as to where recruiters, where students, where deans, where alumni see the value in their international business education.
Okay, thanks, Alan. I think that your point is well taken. So basically, you mentioned the three things. The first one, sometimes we kind of discount the student ability, but they know what they're doing. They know, and particularly those the Ivy majors, that they're self-motivated, right? Nobody pushed that there to study international business. So in order to do it, they already know that it is critical and important that they have to acquire the additional language. Let me show that actually one of the interesting statistics in case that you never heard this. According to the findings from the American Council on the Teaching of Foreign Languages, 9 out of 10 US employers report that they depend on the US-based employees with language skills other than English. Nearly 1 in 4 employers acknowledged they either lost or was not able to pursue a business opportunity due to deficiency in foreign language schools. And I just had a guest speaker who presented that how the Canadian market is substantially different from the US market. And even they think that there's a huge difference between the Canada and US. It's needless to say that between the US and any other parts of the world. And the second point that you mentioned that there was a lack of alignment across stakeholders. So once again, that we were able to identify some areas that these stakeholders didn't necessarily agree. So probably, as you suggested, these stakeholders need to have a better communication, right? So that particularly for the students that make sure that they get the job and the recruiters appreciate whatever they learn at the school. So that's a great suggestion, I think. And the last one that you also emphasized that we should not ignore the areas which turn out to be that didn't get a higher scores. But still, we need to more sort of dive into it and dig out the information so that we can see more, what's in there and why that these people didn't actually score highly on those areas. So again, this is still an ongoing process. I'm sure that as we collect more data in the future, and we'll be able to tease out some of the new sort of findings, right? And developments, as you mentioned. Okay, great. And who wants to follow? Okay, Len? Yep.
Yeah, I noticed a couple of things, Young-Sung, and one is this idea of the short-term and long-term sort of perceptions. I know that the deans and students may have seen this a little bit differently, but one of the questions students ask me often over the past years is should I study, is it okay just to study international business, or should I study marketing and finance on top of that? And I told him my own experience that I always studied international business, but I always studied something else. As an undergraduate, I studied finance. As an MBA, I studied marketing. And then I worked at GE's financial management program after an undergrad, and then I worked in advertising after the MBA. And then as a doctoral student, I studied international business, of course, and then I studied strategy along with that. So I really firmly believe that when somebody goes abroad to do work, they don't necessarily do, quote, international business. They do marketing, they do finance that crosses borders, or economics, or something else. Can the student be successful with just an international business degree? Absolutely, without question. Would they want to try to increase their chances of getting a great job? Yes, I think it's always important to think about a double major or a minor in marketing or finance, et cetera, on top of the IB. But that perception, I think that the deans have, maybe more so, that a functional expertise is important in getting the first job. But long-term, deans understand that over the long run, IB students do very well. In fact, I think my colleague Kiyohiko can support this. He has some information about that IB students make significantly more money than other business students in the long run.
I've seen some of the report from University of Hawaii and also the Temple. At least those people engage in exports or international trade, that their compensation seems to be at least 10%, 11% higher than those that who are not. So maybe at this point, Kiyohiko, do you still remember that
Yes.
findings? So could you share with
It's
us?
an initial salary or compensation difference between the IB, we have only core majors, IB core majors and non-IB core majors. And we found some years close to $8,000 difference on average. Some years it's about $6,000 or something. So that yes, there are some significant differences. At least the recruiters or the companies may value IB education highly for our university's case.
Well, from our result, the alumni, they said that in the long run, actually, that the IB education is much more valuable. We all know that maybe that the entry-level job doesn't really require always, but the international business or education or the background or foreign language acquirement and etc. But down the road, it will help, and you can get a head start if you have a international internship experience, and if you can speak another language, or you are already cross-culturally literate. Yes. Then definitely that this is all plus. Personally, I always believe that IB is a subject that provides the breadth, not the depth. We have enough depth at the business school, CBA education. As you mentioned, some of you that, right? The accounting, finance, but we don't have any course that will help our students to broaden their perspective. In order to understand what's happening, for example, the relationship between the US and China, escalating trade tension, what's going on in Hong Kong, I think that all this require the broad knowledge about what is the historical background, right? Why that Hong Kong is now treated differently by China. What was this sort of included in the China-British the agreement before they signing the deal and etc. So I think that IB education is critical, even though there's some people think that because of this pandemic, maybe we cannot travel, and there will be a, the retreat of the globalization. But hopefully this will be just a temporary thing, and we shouldn't stop educating our students, right? To groom them so that they can become the future and the global leaders and global citizens. Any other thoughts? Maybe Tony?
Just one more thing I wanted to finish up. Sorry.
Sure.
Just to kind of finish up with what I was talking about is this short term versus the long term.
Yes.
The deans with this 13% on the fluency in the foreign languages, I believe that happens because they are under pressure to graduate students in 4 years. And they understand that sometimes these language classes pushes the student beyond that. So because taking languages and double majors makes that graduation within 4 years less likely. So we've, as directors of IB programs, we try to make sure that the students can graduate within that period of time. But I think this issue of the success that students can have over the long run, and even in the short run, as Kiyahiko pointed out, really illustrates and brings home the value of an IB education. Thanks.
Thank you. Tony?
Yeah, the one comment I wanted to make was really just getting back to the question that kicked all of this research off, and that is, is an IB education truly valuable, just to keep it simple? And, you know, I'm involved a great deal at our school in the development of the strategy for the business school, and we're evaluating programs all the time in light of increasing competition out there in the marketplace. And so we have to, justify our existence in many ways. And so I think in terms of IB programs, the two pieces of data that really excite me here is what we heard from the students, and then in Len's presentation among the alumni. In both questions, is it valuable, and would you recommend it? In the case of the students, it was 93%. For both questions. In terms of the alumni, it was 94 and 93%. Well, what does that mean? Quite simply, for me, as I'm evaluating programs, it tells me that we are effective in delivering on our value proposition to our consumers, which are our students. It's not just a question of, can we get them excited with really interesting classes and promises of the future, right? Because if we can't, as alumni, they're going to be very honest with us. So when they come back and they say at just as high a level, I'm excited about this, it's valuable, and I want to tell others about it, it tells me we're doing the right thing. And so then all the rest of the discussion that we've had around this, great discussion by my colleagues here, is how can we make this better, right? How can we better prepare our students? How can we better inform our stakeholders and manage their expectations as well, so that we can perpetuate this great tradition we have of IB education here in the United States. So I'm excited for where this research is going to go, but I'm extremely excited for what this tells us about what so many of us are invested in terms of IB education. It makes me very proud to be part, not just as an IB educator, but part of QIBI, and just excited to see where we go next. Thank you.
Great, thanks. So it's almost an hour and a half. I forgot how long we can talk. Let's see. So I just want to thank everyone involved in today's the panel session, and then share your insights and your experiences. I'm sure that a lot of people will watch this video, and certainly I'm going to recommend that my colleagues to watch this, and then including my dean, and hopefully you'll do the same thing, so that we all can learn, right, from this the session. So if any of you audience, that if you are interested in learning more about this great organization, Consortium for Undergraduate International Business Education, please ask any of us, and we provide all this information. I'm sure that you saw that the email address, each of us, or you can email our secretary, qeb@umsl.edu.